from Steve Darrow. Not a coincidence. But the numbers are the numbers. Steve writes again, I watched your interviews with Dave Rubin and loved them. At one point you mentioned that the two of you could each bring 10 followers, and the 22 of us could hammer out a platform that 85% of the country could agree on. 3 questions. Number 1, let's widen the fold a bit and assume that you can pick any 10 people living today. Who would you select as your 10? Number 2, will you do this as a speakeasy show? Number 3, can I be the one manning the dry erase board in the background? Kind comments, all of them. But the point is, Steve, that I think the specific point is that you don't have to pick them. In fact, I don't want to pick them. If I pick them, there'd be selection bias in there. And when I said 10 of our followers and 10 of Dave's followers, plus Dave Rubin and me, I basically meant 10 general people who call themselves liberals and 10 people who generally call themselves conservatives, and a lot of people here are in the middle. A lot of Dave's audience is in the middle because he's a rational guy, and I certainly try to be. And so that's the beauty of it. It doesn't require, again, it's kind of related to the first question, also asked by Stephen Darrow. That's a remarkable coincidence, actually. It doesn't require geniuses. It doesn't require experts. It doesn't require any kind of selection. I think we could just take random 10 conservatives and random 10 Republicans, 10 people who voted Republican, and 10 people who voted Democrat. And if Dave Rubin and I were leading the conversation simply because we both respect each other's ability to reason, although we're coming from different places, and that ability to respect the other person's reason is so rare in our society now that it's practically an engraved invitation to have a serious discussion. If we were able to start the discussion and keep it civil and make it clear that we're not going to stick to old labels and we can come out of our trenches and get over the I could never vote for a Republican and all Democrats are traitors and all the rest of it, then we would find, I think, that what just about everybody in the country wants is pretty much the same thing. And once you got to the place where you realized that the people who you had thought were adversaries really want the same things that you want, then it becomes a question of what's the best way to do it. And that's a case where rational, reasonable discussion can provide some answers. And many of these answers, if not most of the answers, are what I would call conservative answers, however, with the caveat that I have spoken to many conservatives about the implementation of many of these policies, and their attitude towards the implementation has been, I don't want to say cruel exactly or heartless, but it has assumed that everybody is as capable of willful action on their own as that individual happened to be. And that's where the progressives come in and are handy. You know, it really is kind of a Spock McCoy kind of a thing. With Kirk making the decisions, you can have solutions that are if you sit down and identify the need, and look, and when I say the need's actually pretty simple, honestly. I'd like to live in a safe society where people are not being gunned down in the streets. I'd like to live in a place where I have the ability to live my life as I want to. I'd like to live in a place where there are no starving people on the streets, and to the degree that that's progressive to make sure that nobody's starving in this country. I think we're all probably progressives. So I think I'd like to have a defense that is not only adequate but intimidating and overwhelming, because that's the easiest and when you get right down to it, the most expensive military in the world is actually the cheapest way to live your life, because the alternative is the destruction of pretty much everything. So Merlin Mega says that not the social justice warriors and the socialists, they're not sane, but I disagree. I think they are completely sane. I think that first of all, I think that they've been absolutely, forget about brainwashed, the term is too aggressive. They've been selected. All of their information, all of their stories, all of their emotional connections, all of their heuristics basically have been predetermined for them. And if you have to build a reality out of the things that they've heard, there's no other rational conclusion to come to. So the hard part of this is deconstructing people's heuristic structure, deconstructing their perception of the world based on their emotional response to things. And I think progressives do that more than conservatives, but we do it too. And I found myself many times having a visceral reaction to something and then realizing, well, you know, it actually does make sense. So I think combining these two things, you could in fact put together a political party and a platform that would appeal to 85% of the American population. And I'm going to split 10% off for the progressives and 5% for the conservatives, just as a rule of, just an estimation of people who will say that this is not progressive enough or this is not conservative enough. But when that's basically out of the way, I think you'd be amazed at how much people are in agreement about things. They disagree about how to get there. But again, that's where our friend history can help us quite a lot. We have data. We have evidence. We've seen what happens when we do some things. We've seen what happens when we do some different things. And people on the left can be convinced that the methods are wrong, but first they have to be convinced that our motives are genuine and decent and compassionate and humanitarian. That's the trick. The trick for us is we have to recognize that there are people who are in many ways simply incapacitated, and using drug addicts as an example, I've heard many people on the right basically say it's a self-control problem, it's a willpower problem. Just stop doing it and you'll stop doing it. And while I certainly understand that perspective, I would respectfully reply that that's someone who doesn't have an addiction problem speaking. So once you lay all this stuff out on the table, you can in fact get to a big tent. And to the degree that there'd be disagreement on most of these issues, we could agree to disagree or take the fight somewhere else out of politics. But it's kind of disturbing and kind of sad, and maybe that's something that Dave and I should get together and record, because I think it would really be a lot of fun. And I think I'd learn a lot, and I like learning things. I like having my opinion changed by people who are capable of doing it with good arguments and reason, experience that I haven't had, or viewpoints I haven't considered before, and so on. All right, move.